The title of this video is not hyperbole. I have to tell you that Riot is announcing today the biggest changes that they have ever made since the inception of the League ecosystem back in like 2013. In fact, the future of the LCS nominally is uncertain at this time. Let's get into it. First, I'm going to give you the news on all this stuff, and then I'll provide my analysis and thoughts afterwards, as well as the pros and cons of this. I'll also say that while I have been pre-briefed on this, and I was given an example of the article that's supposed to go out, I do not know what the video is that they will probably be putting out with this. So if there's stuff in the video that isn't referenced here, I'm sorry, I don't know it. The biggest news that is most relevant to the people that are watching this, my audience predominantly in the West and in North America, is that there is now going to be two conferences. So for a while, if you've been watching Hotline League, I've been saying that there's rumors that Brazil and the LCS are going to get merged. It sounds like there's some sort of compromise solution that was basically found, which is a North and South conference for the Americas. If you're not familiar with conferences, they're a traditional sports idea where you have a league or a group of teams that are basically split into two pods. You have, for instance, a West and East conference, etc. This is a North and South conference. So we will have a conference in the South that takes place in Brazil that will mostly be what CBLOL is right now. And then you will have the North Conference in Americas, which is essentially what LCS is right now, but with some major changes. Each of these conferences will only have 8 teams in them. So CBLOL has more than that right now, I believe. We're gonna have to go down to 8. Obviously LCS is 8, but we're still gonna lose some teams because LATAM is getting dissolved. And each conference, South and North, is going to take a LATAM team into their group of teams. So one of the 8 will be a LATAM team in both North and South. The other thing is that they're going to turn the 8th team into a guest slot, which is a term from Valorant. It's essentially a promotion relegation tool where a team from tier 2 can move up and compete in that league for a year, and then they have a chance to lose that slot or gain it again. So we'll have a team that will not be part of that. Yes, that means that 2 of the current LCS teams are going to have to say goodbye. They have not said who that is going to be or how that's going to be decided. I'm sure everyone will speculate on 2 of them, but we will have to see what's up. I'll talk more about that in a second. So the South and North Conference stuff really only comes into play when we head to international events. And speaking of international events, there are now 3 international events. That's right, the reporting that was done by Sheep Esports and others is correct. They are adding this event, and it's happening at the beginning of the year. Now, this is where things are a little confusing if you're reading the article, but I'm taking the understanding of what I was briefed on and combining that here to explain this. In the article that I have seen, they keep calling it international tournament / split. And I think that what Riot is trying to do is create the idea that when season starts in January or whatever, there's a massive global tournament that every team competes in, and the beginning of that tournament takes place in each of their own regions, and then the 5 international regions, there's now 5 because of mergers, we'll talk about that, they all qualify into this one final part of this tournament where all 5 teams compete against each other, and then you crown a winner. That is kind of confusing. I think that ultimately this is just, you have a little mini split. That split qualifies to the first international event. That is how I'm thinking about it. Maybe they will explain it in a better way, but that's what's up. The other interesting thing about this event is that it is all Fearless Draft. So they explain it, I'm not gonna get into it here, but yeah, basically they have Fearless Draft for the beginning, and then the tournament itself is Fearless as well. So it's a great way to see, I guess, more champions. And some people wanted to see Fearless Draft, so we'll see if they stick with this over time. I'm still not completely sold on Fearless Draft. I think a lot of people who talk about it don't know what it is. All right, so then we come back to Split 2. Split 2 runs, and then we have MSI, which is now in July. So they've moved it because the first international event sort of moves things around. This is very similar to what they did in Valorant, by the way. And at MSI, you now only have 10 teams because, again, we're condensing down to 5 major regions. I'll just say the 5 major regions that we will see now are going to be Europe, Americas, China, Korea, and then Asia Pacific. They're kind of merging all regions into these 5 regions. So MSI will have 2 teams from each of these regions attend and participate. The way this works in Americas is 1 representative from the North Conference and 1 representative from the South Conference go to compete at MSI. So in some sense, if you're a North American fan, we've lost the slot because there's a team from the South that is not part of our region currently that will be attending, and that's how that will work. So MSI is now only 10 teams. It's in July. Then you have Worlds. Worlds is 17 teams. Each of the 5 regions will send 3 teams. Then there are 2 other teams that qualify in from MSI or from past performance, and those fight out in sort of the same way we saw Europe and North America fight a couple years ago. So really you just have 16 teams going to Worlds, but they're going to say 17. For Americas, what this means is that there's going to be a big regional championship at the end of the season. And I think that they're kind of trying to get away with the idea of like spring split, summer split champions, and instead our region of Americas, the North and South conferences, will have 1 ultimate season winner for our championship at the end of the year. That event will also determine who goes to Worlds for us, the Americas. So we'll send 3 teams. 1 of them is guaranteed to come from each conference. So again, just to say it, this will mean that there's kind of 1 less team going from North America to Worlds starting next year. So I know this is a lot. I'm just going to summarize it all really quickly. There are now 3 international events. There are now 5 different regions. Americas is going to be one of those regions. There's a North and South conference. They are essentially North America and Brazil with LATAM teams joining up. There's now promotion relegation slots there. There are less teams at all of the international events than there were previously. The first event is Fearless Draft. All right, so before we get into the analysis on all this, I do just want to say it's a little disappointing that Riot is not doing more media around this. There's some conversation that I might be able to interview John around it. We were talking about doing that before this came out. That got moved. John has repeatedly told me in the past interviews that he loves sitting down and talking to me about all this stuff. And it doesn't have to necessarily be with me. You could go talk to other people. Obviously, I'd prefer it's me because I create content. I like to talk about this stuff. But I feel like if you really had a lot of faith in a lot of the changes that you were making, you would be holding press conferences. You'd be unveiling this as like the grand new plan. And it's a little disappointing that there's, as of yet, not a lot of media that is being done around this. And so hopefully that changes in the coming days. I am hopeful that I can talk to Mark and maybe Carlos over on the LCS side about what all this means for Americas soon. But I would love to talk to somebody on the global side about these massive global changes. And if it's not me, I hope other people do as well. Setting aside all that, I have created a list of cons and pros, and we're going to go in that order so that we leave on a positive note on what all this means. And I do want to say, I find myself in a similar situation to where I was when franchising first came out. And that overall, this is pretty interesting to me, and I think it could be pretty good, and I think it could be positive. Nowadays, franchising and the plans that took place in 2017 and 2018 did not age well. If you go on Reddit, there's people that are like, always remember, Travis sold us this false bill of goods and hyped it up. And I don't understand like the methodology there, because if I was a fortune teller and knew that all this was going to go kind of sour at the end, why would I be excited about it? Because I care about the sport and it's also my career, so I don't understand that philosophy. So while I am, I think, actually kind of positive about a lot of these changes, I don't know how they're going to age, and I'm very curious what everybody else thinks, because it has been so much that it has kind of like frazzled my brain trying to think about all the implications on all this, because we have massive changes on the regional side and then also on the global side. I don't know what that's going to look like. And actually, that's a great way to lead off the list of cons for this, which is I think this is a massive system shock. And I think there are a lot of people, for instance, who have been on the fence about how much they should continue to care about Lolesports in North America, in particular for the LCS. And we find ourselves in a world where the LCS may have died. I was not able to get Riot to tell me whether or not they are sure of if the LCS branding will continue, like if we will be able to say that the North Conference is the LCS. So this may well be the last split of the LCS. I think that's because they haven't decided yet. And so I think there are a lot of people who might have been watching the LCS for a long time, might have hit some hard times recently, might have been a little bit excited about some of the stuff that Mark and his team have been doing for this year. And they might look at this and be like, okay, well, LCS is dead. I don't know what this new thing is going to be, so I'm going to leave. I think that could be a con. It's just massive changes might scare off a ton of people. And on top of that, we're reducing teams. We're reducing them globally, which I think is a bit of a bummer. It will feel like Lolesports is shrinking. I understand why they're doing that. We'll talk about that in pros, but I think it can still feel kind of bad. And in North America, we're seeing a weird version of that. We're going to have at least 2 teams leave. By the way, there's also a chance that more teams could leave because essentially I believe that Riot will be offering teams a chance to kind of get a buyout or severance to leave. And you'll have at least 2 teams that will have to make that decision, or Riot will make it for them. But other teams could decide to do that too. So we could see multiple teams leave beyond the 2. But, you know, for some fans, they might be disappointed in that. And what we are getting is something that we'll talk about on the pro side, which is a promotion opportunity. But I think the LATAM stuff could end up feeling very forced. There's no inherent reason why we should have a LATAM team here. I think it could be really fun. You know, it reminds me a little bit of what we do over in Europe, where you have these teams that have a bit more of an identity tied to a region that they are from. And so it could be cool. But I could also see a world where this LATAM team comes in, maybe it's just they're getting beat down a ton because that region has not normally been competitive with North America. You could also see a world where that team, depending on what restrictions are placed on the players they can pick up, just ends up becoming the appearance of every other team in North America. And so then you have this LATAM brand that just kind of has a bunch of international players and some North American talent and maybe one LATAM player or something on it. It could just end up feeling like, well, why did we do this? This is kind of strange. On the topic of regional stuff feeling forced, there is no inherent reason other than sort of structural incentives for the system for the South and North Conference to exist. There's not been some long-standing North America-Brazil rivalry. I don't even think that if you go globally as a concept that there's like a huge North versus South America rivalry, you know, in general in media or concepts, like it's not really a thing. And I worry about Brazil not being competitive enough. Maybe next year they'll be shitting on us and taking international spots from us, but I am not sure of if that will happen. It's not been a historical thing. I think there's a very good chance that at some point in time, we put our best team on a plane. They fly to Sao Paulo. They show up after, 24 hours of travel. They play one match. They shit on a Brazil team. And then they fly back and like JoJo's on his phone being like, I don't know why we did that. That was a waste of time. That is not going to feel very America's region, you know, or that this rivalry will really exist if that type of stuff is happening. And I should be clear that Riot has said that there's going to be a match between South and North before the first international event in that first split. Then there's also the regional championship that happens at the end. So we don't know what those are going to look like. Maybe it is something where we're sending more North American teams or North Conference teams to the South Conference or vice versa. But I just worry that like if at the end of these splits, there's supposed to be this big culmination of these regions going to battle against each other, and it just feels one-sided very frequently, that will feel very anticlimactic and people will be like, why did we do this? So I worry that that could end up feeling not relevant. Speaking of relevance, this also lessens our relevancy on the international stage if you are a fan of North America and its teams, because we will not even be competing internationally under the North American region banner. You know, you will not be able to be like, oh yeah, like the US and Canada, we're here, that's been the big thing. We don't have that identity anymore. We will be competing as the Americas banner. There will also be less North American teams competing on the international stage in 2025 than there are in 2024. That is because we were sharing a lot of these slots and tournaments with our South Conference friends. So for North American fans, that should also feel kind of like a bummer. On that topic, I just want to say, while maybe the European League fans or others for a long time have been like, oh, we should lose our slots. We should have less slots at Worlds because we don't perform as well or whatever. Honestly, there's not a lot of evidence to support that claim. And there's certainly not a lot of evidence that, hey, Brazil's been doing so much better, so we need to lose some slots for their sake. I get the idea that you want to make sure that the South Conference has relevancy on the international stage. I'm just saying it is not like we earned the loss of our slots. So it's just kind of a bummer on that front. All right, let's talk about pros. We're going to end on a more positive note because I want us all to feel good on the outside of this. You know, it's better to feel good about something than, I don't know. Anyway, we're going to get an extra international tournament. People, it's funny because in the article, they're like, we've heard you that you would like an international tournament. And I'm like, finally, you heard this? Like, this has been the constant conversation for over a decade. And so I think it's very funny that they're like, hey, you know what? We've been listening. But it is really cool. We get this extra event. It's happening at the beginning. There's now a better cadence of international play throughout the year because it's not just like May and October. You'll now feel like frequently throughout the year, you're getting some sort of international event. On that front, I think a lot of people are excited about Fearless. Again, I'm skeptical on it, but I think at the very least, they're trying something different. It's not just going to feel like mini MSI, and that's going to feel kind of neat. So I just like the fact that we get to do that. We'll see if I'm going to be able to go and travel to it. I mean, it's only going to be, I think they said 6 days or so. So it's a very short thing, but it is kind of fun, and it will break up what can sometimes be monotonous regional play. The guest slot. This is great. We've talked a lot about how Tier 2 has had issues, especially in North America, throughout this past year or two. I think this will give some good incentive for people to participate. I mean, we just saw Brandon Sanderson come in with Dragonsteel, OTK come in with Starforge, you've got Disguised Toast. If one of these teams end up making it into the LCS for a year and their partner or sponsor, or whatever you want to say, like sticks around, you could have like Cloud9 versus Brandon Sanderson or Disguised Toast getting put up against Team Liquid. So I think that's really great. I can't comment too much about what that looks like in the Brazil region or the South Conference now, but I think that that is good news for us. Losing a couple of the teams in the league that people don't care about as much could be good. I think for a long time, people have been frustrated that certain brands are here. We'll see if those are the ones that depart, because again, we don't know yet what this is going to look like. But I think it's a pretty good chance that we lose some teams that have less popularity and we replace them with some teams that could have more popularity. So that is kind of great. While I did say on the con side that losing the LCS as a brand identity could be unfortunate, it could also be good because maybe people need a reason to come back and maybe they're kind of over the concept of the LCS and they're ready for something new. And so while I would be really sad if they don't just call the North Conference the LCS, I will also understand if that could be a chance for us to have a fresh start, create something new, people could get into it. Change in and of itself is probably pretty good. This league ecosystem on a whole, both the North America side but also globally, has stagnated. We haven't seen very much change. They'll go and tweak, you know, oh, we're going to add a couple teams here, we're going to have MSI qualify a team in, okay, now we aren't, okay, now we are. Like, they've made all sorts of little tweaks here and there, and I think overall, like, esports can evolve at a much faster rate than traditional sports, and it probably should, especially in the early years that we're technically still in. And so I think overall, refreshing the whole thing could be great. On the other hand, it might not be enough change to scare away too many people, because if you are just a North American fan and you mostly just watch whenever your teams are playing at home, you maybe don't pay attention to the international events, it shouldn't feel that different for most days. Like, we're still going to be competing in the arena. There will still be 8 teams. They're going to do the Fearless Draft stuff, I guess, in the beginning, but ultimately we'll have some sort of either best of 1 or best of 3 system. You'll get to just watch, hopefully, Team Liquid and Cloud9 and FlyQuest and a lot of the brands that you're familiar with face off against maybe some other teams. Like, hopefully that should not be too much of a change and people will still stick around. And then a huge pro that people will not necessarily understand as a pro is that we did not completely merge. This was a big rumor going around for a while. We'd seen that in Valorant, they had one massive league for all of Americas. And I think a lot of us, and if you've been watching Hotline League, Cubby and I had been talking about our worries that there was just going to be an Americas League, and it was just going to be probably like 10 teams, a bunch of Brazil teams, some LATAM teams, and some North American teams all just slammed together into one league, broadcasting out of the arena. And I don't know if that's necessarily the best product for Americas. I think a lot of Brazilian fans would be very disappointed if all their teams are now in LA and we have maybe some weird time zone stuff. I don't think that that's necessarily a good thing. And so the fact that we were saved from that by this North-South conference situation that Riot came up with is overall a good thing. And I would say that that is a pro. So there you go. I think overall, I am cautiously optimistic. That is how I would phrase this. I think we are not taking too many hits. It feels bad that we do not have as many North American teams competing on the international stage. I think that's like the biggest thing that I'm bummed about. I do think the change overall could be good. I'm not too sad about the teams that we're losing. I think overall this is probably mostly good, maybe not mostly bad. And so that's where I'm at, but I do know that there are oftentimes ramifications for these things we don't all see, and we're gonna have to see how this plays out. So I do wanna hear from all of you. What is your reception to all this? Please leave a comment, because I know how I feel, but I'm really struggling to predict how the general community is going to feel about this, because it's so much change. We will be having a pretty big hotline league tonight, talk about all this stuff. I'm working, after I do this video, on trying to see if we can get a team owner or multiple team owners on to see what their response is to all of the news, and hopefully we'll have some other guests on. So please tune in and hear all that, and I'll probably do continued coverage of this as we learn more about it over the coming weeks and months. So thanks for watching. Tune in tonight, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you want to support content like this, especially when I don't have a sponsor, there's a great number of ways to do so in the link tree in the description below. Doing so makes it so that I can keep making these videos for you, and I don't just disappear into history like so many other people in esports before me.